Hello and welcome back to Thousand Islands Environmental Center. Today is a very special day. May 15th is Endangered Species Day. So this is a day that's all about celebrating our endangered species and learning a little bit more about them and what you can do to help protect them. So I thought a special topic for us today as far as endangered species go, we're going to talk about the bald eagle. This is a subject that's a little near and dear to our hearts here at the Environmental Center, as we do have resident eagles on the property here. And also, I thought it would be great to focus on the positive. There's a lot of negative that goes on out in the world, but today I really want to share with you a success story, and that is the story of our American bald eagle. So our story starts actually way back in 1782. This is the year that the bald eagle was adopted as our nation's symbol. The United States was home to over 100,000 nesting pairs of this majestic bird. However, bald eagles were already starting to suffer from hunting and habitat loss early on in our nation's history. But 1939 was really the start of major trouble with the development of the chemical DDT. This chemical was great for banishing bugs, lice, fleas, ants, and other pests that crawl. It was used widely to prevent humans from insect-borne diseases. In addition to DDT, another man-made chemical called PCBs were used here locally. One use was in the paper-making process, but it had a number of different uses as well. But when these chemicals were introduced to the environment, they did have some negative consequences. So I just want to take you through a few things just to kind of understand how pollutants such as DDT and PCBs affected the eagles. So we're going to start with a very simple food chain. We're going to find a little piece of green algae at the bottom of that food chain. And what happens is when these chemicals, like DDT, get added to our environment, they will attach themselves to different living organisms. So in our little hypothetical situation here, we're going to just say that one tiny little speck of DDT attached itself to this green algae. So we're going to call this a 0.001 parts per million of DDT on this algae. Now, that may not mean much at all, but as we move our way up to the food chain, we're going to discover this little organism called the Daphnia. Daphnia will feed on algae. So let's just pretend that this Daphnia ate 10 pieces of green algae. Now remember, each piece of green algae had that tiny little speck of chemical on it. However, when organisms digest these chemicals, they aren't broken down in the system, turned into energy like other food sources are. So they accumulate, they stay within that organism. So as we continue to work our way up the food chain, we're going to next look at this nice little fish called the Johnny Darter. Johnny Darter is going to feed on small organisms like the Daphnia. So if our Johnny Darter eats about 10 Daphnia, and each of those have that contamination in it, the Johnny Darter is now up to 0.1 part per million of contamination. Still doesn't look like a whole lot, though. Not a whole lot to be concerned about. Continuing on up that food chain, we're going to find a bigger fish. So we have a smallmouth bass. The smallmouth bass might feed on 10 Johnny Darters. And that chemical continues to follow through that food chain. Now all of a sudden we're at 1 part per million of contamination with that smallmouth bass. Moving on up to the top of the food chain is the bald eagle. The bald eagle might eat 10 smallmouth bass and also ingest all the contamination from the food chain below it. Now take a look at the amount of contamination in this one eagle. Now we're up to 10 parts per million. Now even though this food chain is very simplified and our numbers are a little made up just to show what happens, what I want you to notice is how that accumulates through the food chain. We have an incredible amount of contamination now within this bald eagle. This is a process called bioaccumulation, where small amounts starting at the bottom of the food chain will kind of magnify as it works its way up to the food chain. Anybody notice what else is at the top of the food chain along with those eagles? Humans. That's why anytime you go fishing in the area, you are going to see some warning signs about what fish are safe to eat out of the Fox River, what fish you shouldn't be eating, what fish you should restrict how many you eat, because of that bioaccumulation factor. So bioaccumulation in the eagles affected their reproductive system. They may lay eggs, but those eggs wouldn't hatch at all, or the shells on the eggs were so weak that they would crush under the weight of the incubating eagle. So despite the fact that we established the Bald Eagle Protection Act back in 1940, our eagle populations were still plummeting. It wasn't until 1962 that Rachel Carson published a book called Silent Spring, and that made the first connection between what we were putting out into our environment and the effect it was having on our native wildlife. By 1963, we were down to only 487 nesting pairs left in the continental United States. That's a huge, huge loss from the 100,000 nesting pairs that we had when it was first established as our nation's symbol. However, there were things that were done once we started making these connections. The Endangered Species Act was created. That's what we're celebrating today. The Environmental Protection Agency was established, and DDT was banned. Bald eagles did begin to recover after these things, and they recovered well. So in 1987, even though no eagles had been seen in the Fox Valley for quite some time, we spotted our first pair of eagles on the property here at Thousand Islands. And in 1988, they built their first nest. This got everybody very, very excited. The DNR started sampling the nest. Our staff and volunteers started watching the nest very, very carefully. So the DNR would send wildlife biologists down during their nesting season to sample the young eagles that were in the nest. They would climb up to the nest and then take any of the eaglets that were in that nest, put them in a little sack, lower it down to the ground where they were able to do some testing. So some of the things that they were testing for is they would weigh the eagles, see how big they were. They would determine the sex. Do we have males, females, a combination of the two? They would do some blood samples, study how much contamination, what chemicals were found within those blood samples. They would take feather samples. Any of the eaglets that were in the nest would get banded so they'd be able to keep track of where they ended up. And they even studied what they were eating by looking at what leftovers were in the nest. Any unhatched eggs that they found in the nest, they would take out and send out for testing, once again looking to see what kind of chemical contamination was going on with our eagles. So this was done over a number of years as they watched the success of this nest that we had here on the property. If anybody's interested, there's a very detailed history of this comeback and how the eagles were doing on our website. So just go onto our website, and under the links tab, you'll be able to find that history to read up on all of those details. Today, the eagles are doing well. As a matter of fact, back in 2007, they were removed from the endangered species list, although they are still protected by the Bald Eagle Protection Act. Today, the eagles have been a huge, huge draw for our area, especially in the winter time. We have our annual Eagle Day celebration in January because we get a really large wintering eagle population here in the area. They utilize the Fox River as their food source throughout the winter months. Nesting season is also a great draw for us here at Thousand Islands, and it gets people excited about the eagles. All throughout the Fox River area, you're going to be able to find a number of different active eagle nests. They look very similar to what's behind me right here. This is a replica of an eagle nest, but it is approximately the same size and shape as a real eagle nest. So you can certainly get out and look for some eagles in your area. Here at Thousand Islands, we do have an active nest on the property. It's not one that you can see from our trail system, but it's on the north side of the river in the island section. We've been keeping an eye on that nest this year, and we can announce that it has been successful. We've been able to see a couple of eaglets in the nest, so we are hoping to watch them grow, and hopefully they will successfully fledge out of that nest. Fledging is a word that we use to describe when a bird takes that first flight out of their nest. So fledging with our eagles here usually happens right around the 4th of July. One of the biggest threats that bald eagles face today is lead poisoning. This is a really big push that we're trying to get people to understand their role in protecting this great species. If you're a fisherman, like to get out there and catch some fish, we encourage you to do that, but we want you to do it in an environmentally responsible way. One of the things that we would like to encourage everybody to do to celebrate this year's Endangered Species Day is to understand what role you can play to help protect these species down the line. One of the biggest threats that they face today is lead poisoning. So when you are at your house looking for something to do, start going through some of your outdoor sporting goods supplies. So if you have a tackle box at home, if you're an avid fisherman, open up that tackle box and you're going to discover some items that are in that tackle box that are made out of lead. Everything should be labeled if it is a lead product or not. And what you can do is replace those items with lead alternatives. So sporting goods stores should be carrying lead alternatives, whether it's fishing tackle, hunting ammunition, any of these items. It only takes a very small amount of lead out in the environment to kill an adult bald eagle. Most often, by the time that we notice an eagle is sick from lead poisoning, it has already progressed past the point that it's able to be saved. So very important that your sporting goods equipment is serving the purpose it needs to serve and not having unintended consequences. So you can find hunting ammunition in a lead-free format. You can find sinkers and other fishing tackle in a lead-free format. So make that pledge today and for the weekend to make sure to get the lead out and help protect our great wildlife here in Wisconsin.